I did not expect that I would one day be in a position where I would have to cancel the National Multiple Sclerosis Society, but here we are. It's really not so surprising when you think about it. Nearly every large organization of any kind in the country has been captured by the far left, and if it's a medical organization or a nonprofit that deals with a medical issue, you can be certain that it is run by far left wackos. That's how you end up with this kind of situation, which we'll get into now. So backing up a few days, last week, the MS Society kicked out a 90-year-old volunteer who had been working with the organization for 60 years. Now, just to put that in perspective, this woman, Fran Itkoff, has been volunteering for this organization for nearly as long as the organization has existed. She began volunteering after her husband was diagnosed with the condition, and she continued giving her time even after her husband died 20 years ago. And with that sort of history and track record, you would think that the organization would cherish this woman. They would have a deep sense of loyalty to her and respect for her, and certainly wouldn't even consider terminating their relationship with her except under the most extreme circumstances imaginable, where somehow her behavior, made the decision inevitable. Now, it's hard to imagine what exactly a 90-year-old volunteer could do or say to warrant that response, but whatever it is, it would have to be over the top, outrageous, and offensive. That's what you might think. Or you would think anyway if you were very naive and didn't understand how the world works these days. As it turns out, Fran was fired not for doing anything outrageous or offensive at all, but simply for being a normal human being. What was Fran's crime? Well, she asked a question about pronouns. Apparently, it all began when Fran was asked by the organization to use pronouns in her email signature. And she, being a normal 90-year-old person, had no idea what that meant. She's lived on the planet for 90 years, likely introduced herself 1,000 times to 1,000 different people, and never once had been asked to give her pronouns. In fact, the very phrase, give your pronouns, right? The concept of a person having pronouns, these are my pronouns, this is something that this elderly woman has never encountered or thought about at all. It has no bearing on her life. That's because this whole pronoun ritual was invented 45 seconds ago by gay activists on the internet. Now, you and I are familiar with it because we spend too much time on the internet. Fran, we can assume, does not. And that was the crime she committed, apparently. So here she is last week explaining the situation to Libs of TikTok. Watch.
I was confused. I didn't know what it was, what it meant. And I'd seen it on a couple of letters that had come in after the person's name. They had the pronouns, but I didn't know what that meant. And so finally, when I was talking to her, I thought, I'll ask, what does it mean? And, let her tell me. And so she said it meant that they were all inclusive, which didn't make sense to me because it sounds like you're
labeling
for females and not males if you're just putting in she, her.
She said that she was just asking her what it meant to have a conversation. So as a 90-year-old who didn't know what it meant, she's not street savvy to find out what it meant. Yeah. And when she said that they were required to use it to be inclusive, and my mom was saying that we've always been, the MS Society as a whole and the Long Beach group has just always been inclusive.
A few days later, it was on a Friday at, was it 4:58?
At 4:58, which we thought was odd, but anyway.
At the end of the day, end of the week, I got an email from her saying that they were sorry, but they had to ask me to step down as a volunteer for the MS Society.
And the reason being is that you're not inclusive enough.
The verbiage she said was that she didn't abide by their diversity, equity, and inclusion. So they have to ask her to step down, and she's can't be a part of the MS Society as a volunteer, which to me is ironic because they're saying they're being inclusive, but yet they're excluding a 90-year-old disabled woman who volunteers for over 60 years.
So I like her initial response to the thing when she was told we're inclusive, and of course her first response is because she's familiar with that, what that word is supposed to mean, and so she says, what do you mean? Of course we include everybody. We're the MS Society. We don't exclude anyone. We don't tell anyone that they're not allowed to benefit from the charity we do because of course we include everyone. But But of course, that's not what is meant by inclusive when it's used these days. And that's the irony of it. In the name of inclusivity, they're excluding this woman for asking a question. It's not like Fran stridently objected to using the pronouns. It's not like she went in there and said, look, this is the dumbest thing I've ever heard of. You people are morons. I've been alive for 90 years. I've never encountered human beings as stupid as you. Now, she would have been entirely justified in saying that. I would enjoy it if she did say that, but she didn't, because she's a nice, sweet old lady who was looking for clarification, not confrontation, and yet they kicked her out anyway. Now, later in the week, the MS Society released a statement defending their decision to fire her. Reading from their statement, it says, quote, "As an organization, we firmly believe that we best serve and support those living with MS by creating a space that welcomes all. This is especially true for self-help group leaders who are responsible for leading meetings for people affected by MS to confide in and support one another. Recently, a volunteer, Fran Itkoff, was asked to step away from her role because of statements that were viewed as not aligning with our policy of inclusion. Fran has been a valued member of our volunteer team for more than 60 years. We believe that our staff acted with the best of intentions and did their best to navigate a challenging issue. As an organization, we are in continued conversation about assuring that our diversity, equity, and inclusion evolve in service of our mission, and we will reach out to Fran in service of that goal." Now, if you understand woke language, you'll understand it more than a typical 90-year-old who lives a life blessedly insulated from much of this would, then you already know how to translate some of the key phrases in this statement. For example, continued conversation means, in this case, not a conversation at all. A conversation is what Fran was trying to have originally. She was trying to have a conversation, like a person, where someone said something and she's like, I don't know what you mean by that. Can you explain it? And then they said, you're fired. So that's what a conversation is. They don't want a conversation. Conversation for them means instead that they dictate what you do, say, and believe, and then you sit silently and nod your head. That's what a conversation is to them. It's the only conversation they want to have. And in similar fashion, navigating a challenging issue does not mean that they are navigating a challenging issue. It means that they instead are creating an issue out of whole cloth, responding to the issue that they created in the most deranged and morally abominable way imaginable, and then applauding themselves for their wisdom and nuance. And of course, as we already covered, inclusion here does not mean inclusion or anything like inclusion. It means instead the rigid, ruthless exclusion of anyone who fails to precisely and painstakingly conform to their dogmas. So that was the end of it as far as the National MS Society expected and hoped. They did this horrifically insane thing. They treated an innocent woman like dirt. They exposed themselves as a bunch of deranged, cowardly goblins, and then they moved on, or they wanted to. If your house is feeling chilly right now, you may need to consider window replacements. I get it. If you haven't yet replaced the windows in your home, it can be an intimidating project and prospect. Luckily, there's a company that will do the work for you. Renewal by Andersen is your one-stop shop for window design, manufacture, and installation. Windows play a crucial role in regulating indoor temperatures. If you notice a spike in your heating or cooling bills, it may be due to inefficient windows. Don't put it off any longer. Renewal by Andersen offers limited, fully transferable, and best-in-the-nation warranty coverage. Right now, Renewal by Andersen is offering a free in-home consultation on quality, energy-efficient, affordable windows or patio doors with special financing options. Text Walsh to 200-300 for a free consultation to save $375 off every window and $775 off every door. These savings won't last long, so be sure to check it out by texting Walsh to 200-300. That's Walsh to 200-300. Texting privacy policy and terms and conditions posted at textplan.us. Texting enrolls for recurring automated text marketing messages. Message and data rates may apply. Reply stop to opt out. Go to windowappointmentnow.com for full offer details. Courage Under Fire is going to be the event of the year. Come and join me on May 24th in Nashville, Tennessee for a night of encouragement and camaraderie. Courage Under Fire will host some of the top leaders in faith, the pro-life movement, and culture to share in the true, the good, and the beautiful. I'll be speaking alongside Dr. Abby Johnson on how to have courage and stand up for the truth no matter what adversity you face. We'll be joined by some of the most influential leaders in the conservative movement for a night of connection and inspiration. All proceeds from the gala will directly benefit students in need of tuition assistance at Regina Chaley Academy, which is the premier classical homeschool hybrid for Catholic families. VIPs will have access to an exclusive meet and greet with guest speakers and live music during cocktail hour. If you haven't grabbed your tickets yet, you need to do so. For tickets, visit courageunderfiregala.org and use code DailyWire at checkout. That's courageunderfiregala.org and use code DailyWire. Can't wait to see you there. But unfortunately for them, the public found out about all this, thanks in large part to libs of TikTok, and this led to a fully justified and quite reasonable public backlash. In the organization, they tried to hide under a bed for a while until people stopped shouting at them. But that strategy only lasted a few days until they finally relented and issued this follow-up statement. This is what they posted yesterday. Quote, the National Multiple Sclerosis Society apologizes to our longtime dedicated volunteer, Fran Itkoff. Recently, we asked Fran to step down from her role as a group leader because of statements made that we viewed as not aligning with our recently implemented diversity, equity, and inclusion policy. We realize now that we made a mistake and we should have had more conversations with Fran before making this decision. Over her 60 years of volunteer service, Fran has been a committed champion for our cause. We had an opportunity to work with her and support her as a self-help group volunteer leader, but as an organization, we fell short. While we acted at the time with the best intentions, we did not have clear protocols in place. We should have spent more time with Fran to help her understand why, as an organization, we are dedicated to building a diverse and inclusive movement where everybody has equitable access to the care, connections, and support they need to live their best lives. Okay. So, they have apologized to Fran and asked her to come back. No word yet, as far as I know, on whether Fran has any interest in working with them again. Either way, needless to say, the organization deserves absolutely no credit for issuing this apology and retraction. For one thing, they're only doing it because they have to. Their outrageous mistreatment of this elderly woman was exposed. Donors were threatening to pull their funds, and the National MS Society had no choice but to back down. If this story had never gone public, if nobody ever found out about it, if they'd been able to just toss this old lady overboard and continue rowing along like nothing happened, then that's exactly what they would have done. So this apology was made out of necessity, not for any moral or ethical reason, which means that it's totally meaningless and they get no credit for issuing it. Also, they aren't really apologizing. At least they aren't apologizing for the things they should be apologizing for. They said that they should have had more conversations with Fran. They should have made protocols more clear and done more to, quote, help her understand why she's expected to engage in these bizarre rituals. But that, of course, is not the problem. The problem isn't that they didn't help Fran better conform to the insane DEI policy. The problem is that the insane DEI policy exists. They should be apologizing for the policies themselves, and by extension for mistreating Fran in the name of that policy. And then they should be firing everybody who had a hand in crafting the policy and in firing Fran. That's what a real apology would be. That's what actual accountability would look like. Which is why the people threatening to pull their funds should still pull them. Like if you donate to the National MS Society, you should stop and you should not start again. I don't care if they made this apology. They should still be made to reap the consequences. That's the only way to put a stop to this madness. Or else there will be a lot more Frans falling victim to it in the future. And that's why the National MS Society is today canceled. Thanks for checking out this video. If you'd like to listen to my full podcast on the go, you can check out The Matt Walsh Show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.